What is up, everyone? Welcome to the first episode of College Esports Insider. It's going to be a fun one here. I have Christine Fan, the EDU Program Manager of MSI. How are you today?
Pretty good.
That's good to hear. Alright, so let's hop right into it. So, can you talk a little bit about your upbringing in esports, kind of what you did when, you were going through college, and I think you were at Trident Esports, right, at UC San Diego?
Yeah. So I went to UC San Diego in 2016 as a biochem major, and I didn't join Triton Gaming immediately. I spent my freshman year playing a lot of World of Warcraft and then realized, damn, I need friends. And so I went online and I looked up, video games and UCSD, and then Triton Gaming came up and I saw that they had a Discord. So I joined that. And then I started attending events, met a lot of the officers, started volunteering at their events, and then eventually became an officer for the club and, moved up to social community director. So I was doing a lot of the community management.
Mm-hmm.
And then, after that, leveraged my position there to become the NVIDIA GeForce student ambassador for UC San Diego, and then mostly focused on that until COVID hit, and then it was just the job search, and now I'm here at MSI doing basically what Dom did at the NVIDIA GeForce student program, helping students get the info they need on careers, provide event support, community management, the whole shebang.
Nice. So when you started off as a student ambassador for NVIDIA, what kind of things did you do there?
So for that program, the main company goal, or the main KPI, the measure of success for Dom, was the number of quote unquote gamers that we would create through the program. During that time, the 10 series had just come out. It was a really good time for NVIDIA. And they had felt like they had reached a sizable level of saturation in the market. So, at that point, there really wasn't a gamer who didn't know about NVIDIA graphics cards. So the goal of the program was, how can we reach out to new audiences, get more people aware of the brand. So a lot of our activities were focused on merging, community engagement with the NVIDIA branding. So we did a lot of game nights, occasional panel. It was really physical events focused. So, RIP during COVID. But all in all, it was about just getting students the ability to actually, get a graphics card without breaking their bank, having fun with other students, meeting people across the nation, and overall just, making connections and building a community around the NVIDIA brand.
I gotcha. So, and as you transitioned into MSI, were you the first MSI EDU program manager?
No, actually, the program first started with Kat Tompkins, and she was able to help support a couple schools like University of Utah, UC San Diego, that I know of, and basically launched the MSI Loaner program with UConnect. So a lot of the framework was laid down by her, and then she moved over to ASUS and helped me get in touch with the team here to interview for this job. Um, so she's largely responsible for getting the ball rolling
Hmm.
at MSI and um, helping set up the Discord that we now use today still, and helping the company understand the importance of Collegiate, and um, now I just kind of build upon what she started.
Gotcha. And you said you started that during COVID, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I've only been here for a little over a year,
Hmm.
and I also bounced between departments.
Gotcha.
So I was um, actually doing sales for about half of my time here,
Hmm.
and then this program itself only really started in March 2022.
Gotcha. So how's it been for you guys? Like you see more and more clubs getting involved, more clubs kind of starting up their initiatives to do events. How's that been in your perspective from MSI? Kind of looking at all the clubs you support and all the students you speak to. Because I've noticed an increase in a lot of college esports events, specifically with the Smash community. I've noticed a lot of it, but there's been also a lot of increase in lands generally. So, what can you speak to kind of the volume of collegiate esports events that are going on right now?
I think it's great. I would definitely say that, based on my experiences when I was a student, things were a lot more smaller in scale, more regional focused. I think
Hmm.
now we're seeing a lot of schools realize that they can't just rely on their neighbors to build communities. So I'm seeing a lot more long distance collaborations, which is
Hmm.
really nice. I do think that we're kind of reaching a point where, especially with COVID and it being hard to, meet people in person, gaming was the next route, the next logical route for people to take to build those social connections. On top of, in general, physical community spaces are very sparse in America. So, younger people are increasingly becoming more and more online. So, we're seeing a lot of the newer generations who are heavily tech reliant um, already already have the hobby of gaming. So
Hmm.
really, a gaming club is just the next step of building a community around this hobby. Um, a trend that I actually see more now is actual schools getting involved with esports.
Hmm.
This is, I would say, increased over the years. MSI, a part of the reason why we have this program and are able to fund this program is because we do help build arenas for schools
Hmm.
and outfit them with our computers. Um, and, that's a lot of the reason why a lot of companies have different marketing initiatives is it leads to some sort of revenue stream
Right.
because, it, it's a focus on profits. So, seeing that increase is good because I think schools are finally understanding that gaming is an enrollment driver. And, it being the most consumed media in the world should really say something about the demand that a lot of schools have just not tapped into. So I think, collegiate esports, or I guess scholastic esports in
Hmm.
general, will continue to grow. I'm not sure in what direction, since there is a lot of talk about whether or not we should be emulating the model that athletics has,
Right.
or being a lot of departments are run under recreation or they're absorbed under athletics. Um, so I think we'll probably be in a rough period where schools are finding what works for them,
Hmm.
and then once they figured out their own processes, it'll be, how do we work with other schools to build these frameworks and build these systems where we can have more smoothly running tournaments,
Right.
and competitions where, people are not getting twit-longered every weekend. I think it's still very much the Wild West right now, but I'm excited to see what will happen in the upcoming years.
I have to touch on two different things real quick. So, one of the things you mentioned is, programs living in athletics versus, student affairs or recreation, whatever, right? In your opinion, what have you seen being more successful? Because I've been having talks with a lot of people about that, especially here in the state of North Carolina, where a lot of programs are kind of seeing the transition from clubs to more than that. Is where do we fit this under? Do we fit this under athletics? Do we fit this under student affairs and recreation? Like, where do we do? In your opinion, what have you seen work out best?
So I think it's highly dependent on what the goals of the program are. Some programs, they're not very competitive
Mm-hmm.
focused, so it doesn't really make sense for them to be under athletics. Sometimes for them it's more about the live events, um, more about the casual community. Not it's not always about your NECC placements, right?
Right.
And I think it's entirely up to the school to decide how they want to do that. Again, each community is so different
Mm-hmm.
that what works for your school might not work for another, because they each have their own budget processes, interdepartment collaboration processes. For example, some schools, if they want to collaborate between departments, they actually have to pay each other,
Mm-hmm.
even though they're under the same, school umbrella. The way that the budget works is that money has to flow between them, which can, have some hiccups when, for example, a department controls a building that another department wants to host an event at.
Mm-hmm.
Then they have to pay the room booking fee, right? Um, Whereas, like, some other schools, they don't have that, because for them, when they were, being set up, it just didn't make sense for it to be run that way.
Right.
Um, and that goes the same for, events too, right?
Mm-hmm.
How successful an event is isn't necessarily whether or not you marketed it well enough. Sometimes it's about things like, how easy was it to get to the event room? Was it hosted on a day where there are finals happening, or
Mm-hmm.
unit tests happening? And you can extrapolate that to programs. And I know that everyone feels like they have, quote unquote, the solution, on how to run their program most successfully. But when you're just running one program, there are, you know, things that can transfer between programs, but
Mm-hmm.
each one is still going to be super customizable to, the way that your school is laid out, the way that your finances are laid out. Do you already have a revenue stream? Sometimes it's just better for a program to be under a department that has the budget and space, and
Right.
that's not always athletics. Um, so I think it's really important to understand, like, when you're building up a program, is understanding, the base needs of what a program needs to run to be successful. It needs a community space. You need good internet. You need to understand what kinds of games your students play.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have a huge Smash community, and you run 100-person Smash tournaments, and you know you might not have a large League of Legends community, so your League of Legends events might only have 20 people at a time. Trying to understand what makes sense for your school and kind of just going from there, I think is the best way. It's not really about. It's not always about nitpicking the gritty, like the finer details of like how a program is different from yours.
Right.
It's more about understanding the reasoning of how that program got to there.
Another thing that I wanted to ask you, and this is something that I've particularly been asked by smaller schools a lot, is the separation between casual gaming and esports itself within a club. I've seen there's two smaller schools here in North Carolina that I've been advising lately with their esports club, and they were trying to get it started and get their growth. But something that they've struggled on, specifically on campus, is they've already had a presence of like a gaming club, for example, right? And it's trying to figure out if there's any separation or how to get them to work together, or if there should even be a separate esports club from a gaming club. It's another one that I've seen around with some of the schools that I've talked to, where they've had to separate it due to difference of operations and opinions. Do you have any sort of opinion on that or anything to say on it?
So I would say that at times it can be good to separate what most people would categorize as casual and competitive. But it's not really because there's a difference between the two. They're actually quite intertwined. You can have a team that competes, but if you don't have a community behind them to support them, to root for them, to help them, be successful, it's not going to succeed in the way that, people associate with a team's success.
Right. Yeah.
It can be quite lonely to just play competitively and then not have anything else attached to that. So I do heavily encourage collaboration between the two. Even if you have different processes, there are still things that you can agree on, that you can set aside your differences to come together to work together. And I know that, a lot of younger students, you're still learning these collaboration skills, these interpersonal skills, but this is where it starts, right? You can't let differences of opinion get in the way of a program's success, because it's not about you, it's about the success and longevity and sustainability of your school's gaming and esports initiatives.
Right.
You're just there in that moment as a part of something bigger than yourself, right? And that's something I want students to understand is you all just happen to be in the same place in the same time. You should make the most of it, get what you want out of it, and understand that you will eventually move on. And so that goes into the whole. So the way that I see it is, if you're going to have a competitive esports team, a lot of times those need to be under a department of some sort, because competing in things is expensive. Traveling to events is expensive. You need some sort of funding to back you up.
Right.
And also, getting a space is expensive.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of clubs do not get a lot of funding. They're not going to be able to afford their own setups, much less have the pull that they need to even find a space on campus. So it's good to have a portion of your program under some sort of department, but that doesn't mean everything needs to be under a department.
Right.
I see a lot of success in programs that have a more esports focused. And esports, I mean competing in tournaments, representing your school officially. That's what I'm going to call esports. Right. Those require the structure that a department can provide, But with that structure comes rules and it comes liability. So, it's good to have a separate section more dedicated to live events on campus, and like casual community building that doesn't operate under the school, because the students will then have more freedom to try new things. There's not as much time. You don't have to wait as long for paperwork and bureaucracy because, again, you're just a student club. You will have, less funding overall, but sometimes the creative freedom is worth it. And just because you're a part of one program doesn't mean you can't be a part of the other program as well.
Right.
It's kind of finding that happy balance of like, what exactly are you trying to learn? Which program can get you there the farthest? And do you enjoy the work that you're doing?
Right.
Right? Because if you're not enjoying the work and it's causing you misery, why are you putting yourself through that when
Right.
on top of this work you're paying thousands of dollars to get a degree at school, right? Like, I'm a firm believer that while you should be working hard, you shouldn't be pushing yourself to the point of being miserable.
Right.
Right. College is one of the few times that students have both autonomy. They have the autonomy of not being chained to a desk for 8 hours a day, and they have the energy to go pursue what they want, stay up all night, travel to different areas back to back, and you should really take that time to enjoy yourself, because once you start working, that freedom for the most part goes away.
Right. And last thing I want to cover about, students, specifically student-centered things. What's your take on students who want to pursue esports careers straight out of college? So I think there was a tweet not too long ago that went viral on Twitter. I can't remember who the lady was, but she was saying that students should try to pursue other facets in their career within their degrees before they even try to attempt to break into esports, just so that they could have a little bit of experience going into it versus just straight out of college trying to find a job in esports.
I actually agree a little bit. I remember that tweet longer. I think it was someone from C9 who posted that.
Yes, it was.
She was very right in that esports is not super stable, and as an industry, it doesn't pay people the best. We've seen all the the stuff on the socials. It's also super common for people to not be paid on time.
Right.
And I think it's good to want to pursue your passions, but it's also good to be realistic.
Right.
There is a reason why a lot of people don't get hired, and if I'm going to be honest, it's not really about people's skills. At a certain level, especially if you're just out of college, the level of skill that you have is, pretty. The differences are pretty negligible between people. A lot of the deciding factor are things like, how close is this person to the company already in physical location, aka are they going to need any sort of financial support to move to the company's location if they get hired? Do they fit in well with the company culture? Do they understand what the company is about? Does the person hiring them like them? Things like that. Is this person well spoken? It can even be influenced by unconscious biases of hiring teams because, we live in a heavily prejudiced country,
Right.
and everyone grows up with these unconscious biases. No matter how colorblind people can claim to be, there are things that they were influenced by growing up that they might not be aware that they're still being influenced by. And you can see that in the employment trends. You can see that in the kinds of people that get hired to represent shows and host shows, these are all different factors that, as an individual, you have no control over for the
Right.
most part, right? You can put on your best face, your best smile, show them everything that you've done, but at times the deciding factor is really just based on vibes, based on physical location, based on what budget is available to hire people.
Right.
So I don't want people to get discouraged by this information, but to be realistic and see that, like, oh, hey, I've applied to all of these things and I'm not hearing back. It's sometimes it's really not because you're not good enough, right? And so, like, I would encourage people to diversify where they're applying to. Honestly, sometimes it's just better to find a normal company to work at that does marketing and games,
Right.
and working on those teams, building up your credibility because you have a normal company attached to your resume, but you still get that gaming and esports experience without the gaming and esports pay.
Right. A lot of my students also, like, they've been very much like trying to figure out, hey, can I go work in the competition side of esports? Can I work in this? I think a lot of people also don't understand the fact that they have to wear so many multiple hats when working in esports. Then that's not something that they're really used to doing, especially when you talk about someone who comes from a student background, a student club in esports trying to phase into the professional industry. A lot of people aren't ready for, having a presence on social media, or, whether it be meeting KPIs in spaces that they didn't even know. We had no clue with their degree or what was going on. So I know that at least that's something that I've noticed, and especially with myself being in the kind of live event space in esports for so many years now. So a lot of people are not ready to do more things than what they signed up for. That's just something that they're ready. So definitely, like, to your point of diversifying yourself, I think that speaks a lot of volumes into these students and what they should be kind of looking for if they want to attempt doing something in esports in the future.
Yeah, I would definitely not specialize if you want to go into esports. It sucks because students don't have a lot of time to do a
Right.
lot of things on top of, you have to pay tuition, you have to pay your rent, you have to get good grades, you still need sleep, and, then you're probably working at a job of some sort because esports at a collegiate level doesn't pay. So, if you break all that stuff down, for the most part, people have maybe like 1 to 2 hours of free time
Yeah.
max a day for themselves on top of everything else. It's a really grueling lifestyle, to be a student in collegiate esports. And on top of that, being told that you can't just, focus on one thing and that's going to help guarantee you, some sort of position when you get out of college. Right now, esports unfortunately just doesn't have the money to pay for specialists,
Right.
unless you're going to a team that is, like, very specifically mentioning that they only want you to have one type of skill set. For the most part, you're going to have to do multiple things. If you like video editing, to be honest, you will probably also have to do photo editing, be able to take photos, make content. Sometimes you might even have to do the paperwork related to all that, like setting up budget, doing all the outreach. I'm not a videographer, so I'm not entirely sure the process, but sometimes you might have to direct the whole content calendar
Right.
on top of shooting the videos, taking the photos, making sure everything is running smoothly. Even though your job description might just say, videographer, right? You might be doing way more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would honestly just say that a lot of professional esports is like collegiate esports, but with maybe 10 to 20 more emails attached to it.
Yeah.
And probably at a much larger scale. But for the most part, a lot of companies are running lean. There's a new word for quiet hiring, which is basically just means they're giving people more work than what they're supposed to be being paid for. And it sucks, but that's just the reality of this industry right now. We may get to a point where things can be a little more equitable, but that heavily relies on esports being more financially responsible in the first place.
Right. There's a lot of talk right now about the overinflation in the pro industry and how that's been affecting jobs in general. And, we just saw massive layoffs in teams like 100 Thieves. And it's really unfortunate that it's happening and that it happened that way. But at the end of the day, the industry, I think, is at a point right now where it's trying to normalize itself. And it's being tough for people for sure. It sucks that a lot of people are being negatively affected right now by what's going on. But yeah. Switching.
Yeah, I do.
Oh, go ahead.
I do see it as part of esports. It's the wish to be recognized and legitimized and treated a lot like physical sports.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not there yet, but one of the things that can make people feel like they're there is if, certain salaries are very high. And when you pay these players exorbitant amounts of money, it has to come somewhere.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be getting these major financial opportunities from brands or from events, to be quite honest. And so the only way that they can pay people these amounts is if they slash costs,
Right.
which tend to be other people's jobs. I won't claim to have an answer for this because it's a systemic one. It's not just one team responsible for this. It's everyone, doing their own job that builds into a system which creates these outcomes and forces leaders to make these decisions, because if you don't pay this player this rate, another team will. And another team will cut the costs anyways, right?
Right.
So it's a tough position to be in as a leader of an esports team. You have to make a lot of hard decisions.
Right.
And you have to be able to plan fiscally. You have to be able to plan well if you don't want to be the bad guy in, really influencing a lot of your workers' lives and messing with their livelihoods. So
Right. It also deters a lot of people away from the space, I think. It kind of makes them go away, and it makes them try other career paths in other industries, which, for them at least it's good because it's more job stability. It just sucks that because of what's going on right now, it feels like it's almost, we're kind of going, at least to me, we're going a little bit backwards from where we should be, which sometimes that's what's needed. Just sucks.
Yeah, progress isn't linear at all. And when you live in a society that moralizes the ability to make profit over everything else, a lot of people are going to get hurt. in that pursuit of profit. And obviously that's not a good thing from a community level, from a just human level, but at the end of the day, you have to make money to survive, and people have to make the hard decisions. And so we've lost a lot of good people in this industry because of that. So I do think that things will have to change eventually, but that's not something a lot of us are currently in a position to be able to do.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that maybe 5 years we'll see an increased interest in esports. Maybe see some more money flowing in.
Mm-hmm.
If we can get COVID under control, if we can get climate change under control, things will look up eventually. But we have to get through this rough patch right now.
Right.
And I would just recommend to any student that's currently looking for a job in esports is to just have a contingency plan in place. Don't put all your eggs in a basket. It doesn't matter how secure your job you might think your job is or will be in this industry. No one is safe, to be frank.
Right.
And if you want to make sure that you can continue to pay your bills, you should always have a backup plan in place.
Yep, yeah. There's another way to put that. Switching topics a bit, I have one more thing, and it's kind of the talking collegiate right now. It's the Collegiate Esports Awards. So we just got done in December with the 2022 Esports Awards. You were the winner of the Ambassador of the Year, so congratulations, first off.
Thank you.
But what do you want to see happen in 2023 with the Collegiate Awards? Now that we're kind of getting branched off to have our own awards entity, part of the Esports Awards, technically still, but it'll be its own thing. What kind of things would you like to see out of that?
I think it would be good to have a networking portion that is affordable and accessible to students. It doesn't necessarily have to be a physical thing. But for me, the best value I got out of the Esports Awards last year was being able to meet people like you for the first time and have those opportunities to discuss what's going on in our space.
Right.
I think it's really important for students to break out of just being in their own bubble at their own school, and understanding that there's a lot of different people and strategies out there that they can learn from to be more successful. And another thing I would like to see is more recognition of the different kinds of programs and people in our space. It's really hard to quantify impact and success if you only have like 2 awards.
Right.
Because everyone does their own thing for the most part. That don't necessarily. It's like comparing apples to oranges,
Right.
We might all be fruits, but we're different kinds of fruits.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty excited to see more categories, see more people be recognized, get more recognition from the, I guess, like mainstream esports, and like more establishment in kind of collegiate esports being that first level of esports. It's the place that people go to practice before they start working on these big productions and these bigger companies.
Yeah. Another talk that I've seen going around a lot, and it happened this morning on one of the collegiate Discord servers, what's the timeline that it should happen in. There's a big split between people thinking it should be attached to the main ceremony that happens at the end of the year versus people thinking that it should happen, June timeline right after the academic year is over. Um, which I'm a big fan of the summer one happening right after the academic year is over. Just because I think one of the issues that I personally had was that you were recognizing programs for the work in the past year, but when you talk about the year in collegiate, that was not the past year. That was the second half of the academic year and then the first half of the next. So at least that's my take on it, but what are your thoughts on that?
Uh, I mean, from a business perspective, it's a lot easier to attend things if they're attached to a larger event.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, to be frank, a lot of companies themselves, while they see the importance of the collegiate demographic, they're not going to throw money to a lot of collegiate things.
Right.
And it's mostly an ROI thing. We're just not there and showing,
Mm-hmm.
financial conversions and whatnot. Um, so for me personally, it would be easier if the esports awards and the collegiate esports awards were together. But from an academic program perspective, it does make sense to have it in June. Um, so, I think it's good to be aware of, like, first of all, how is this event going to be paid for?
Right.
What are the returns that, the esports awards is going to be able to get running this event? Because while we all like to say that community and celebrating ourselves is the main goal, it's not going to pay their
Yeah.
bills either. And they've done an amazing job listening to the community and going out of their way to help build this when, the community has been crying out for it. But we also need to understand that, you know, they're also a company.
Right.
And if we want things like these, we have to be able to show how it makes sense in a financial aspect.
Right. The take, I don't know, something that I've been, this is just internal talks that I've been having with my team, but I think that for us being a, all student run is we had to have the stars align to be able to pay for us to go to Vegas last year. We got really lucky that our computer science department, like basically, I think it's something like 60% or something like that, or it's 40 to 60% of our students are computer science students in esports here at UNTC. So they were able to give us some of the money to be able to attend. And in terms of being able to afford travel, we got extremely lucky that we had two different social media competitions that paid out a large sum of money happen back to back at the time that they did for us to be able to pay for it, right? Where I think my other big concern when it came to financially being able to for students to be able to attend this is the price tag that the main ceremony has attached to it. It's not something that's realistic for students versus I think, at least in my opinion, and something that we talked about was, well, what if you were to host it at a university where you wouldn't really have to pay that much to rent out that venue if you were to partner with one of these programs to host it, and then on top of that, cut the cost on attendance for more students to attend, which in case would sell more tickets. So that was something that we talked about, but yeah, to be honest, I don't really know how the format of esports awards making the revenue really goes in order to be able to see if that's something that's realistic. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that take.
I think I do agree that the ticket prices should be lowered in the collegiate portion of the awards because students shouldn't have to pay the equivalent to a rent check in
Right.
order to attend, right? Um, maybe that gets subsidized through sponsorships, or maybe it gets subsidized through another revenue that Esports Awards has. Or maybe they find ways to cut costs low enough where if you are able to sell a minimum number of tickets, that technically the event is paid for, right?
Right.
And I don't know where these revenue streams come from, and I can't say how they really make their money through this sort of stuff. So there are a lot of different options, and I think it's important for the awards to do what works best for them financially,
true,
and then because if we want something to be sustainable, it does have to make money.
Right.
That's just the truth of it, and sometimes those decisions are not going to be the most popular.
Yeah.
So really what we can only do is, once that information comes out, is find ways to ensure that we get as many students attendance and access as possible.
Right.
And then I think everything else, it will fall in place. It's just like any other esports event, collegiate or professional. You're going to have fires. You're going to have issues. Things will probably be last minute, but in the end, most people find a way to work things out.
Right.
And sometimes that's all you can be. That's all you can have, and that's what you should be happy with.
Well, that is true. So, just to kind of wrap things up here, is there anything else that you would like to say, any message that you have to anybody in the collegiate scene specifically?
I would say that if you're looking for advice, or job application resources, or, event sponsorships or program support, definitely reach out to me. If you Google MSI student, we have a website that will take you to our Discord. We do hardware giveaways. We have student discounts. We send pictures of our cats. It's a fun time.
There's some good food pictures in there too. I saw I think there was some udon in there. Oh, that looked delicious.
Yeah, I love the food that the students send.
Yes.
But yeah, if you want to, meet other collegiate people or just learn more about how to get into esports, I'm an available resource. Just join the Discord, reach out to me, don't be afraid. And yeah, that's all I have. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for coming on. Greatly appreciate you being the first guest ever to come on. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for everybody for listening in and watching. Go check out MSI Student. Join the Discord. It's a very good resource to have. And just get involved.